Welcome back to the podcast. I've brought back a guest we actually had on already, but he was captivating me with his story so much that I had him return. Hello, Ollie.
Hey Josh, how's it going?
So last time we spoke a little bit about an Arctic Circle race that you did. We talked a little bit about how you got into endurance. Do you want to give people a quick recap of what we talked about?
Yeah, that was a 3-day event on cross-country skis, and that was in Greenland. It's called the Arctic Circle race. I did that a couple of years ago, 2018, I think. Basically, in a nutshell, it was an event which I'd never even heard of in September 2017. And my good old partner in crime, Slatts, said, "Well, let's try and learn a new skill, and let's go in at the deep end and do the hardest race in the world." So failed again, failed, more training, more failing, and then eventually had a kind of penny dropping moment which enabled me to actually do the sport that I was practicing to do well enough to actually move forward and not fall over. And then got ourselves out to Greenland, and in some pretty hostile environments and temperatures, we got it done. So yeah, definitely an experience to savour, and I will be talking about that and boring my grandkids in years to come.
Well, so it was a brilliant story, and we spoke about it for a while, and I was sort of sitting there, just sort of getting all the wonderful details about it. But we ran out of time for the other race that I want to talk about. So I want to talk a little bit about race across America, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, sure. So Race Across America is known as the hardest single stage cycling race in the world. So people would say, "What about Tour de France?" Well, that is obviously a multitude of sections and stages over many days, 3 weeks. Was it 2021 stages, something like that? Whereas Race Across America is start in California, and the stage does not end. The clock is still going until you get to Maryland in Annapolis. And so, and it's brutal. It's known as the most tough endurance cycling event on the planet. And how I came to do it was quite interesting, because I was working in Canary Wharf in London, in running the gym in Bank of America, and I'd previously, 2007, I done Transalps, and in 2008, then someone said, "Why don't you do an Ironman?" And I had to learn to swim, and had to learn to brick train, running off the bike, etc. Got that done, and the guy that I'd bought my bike from said, "Oh, tell you what you should do next is Race Across America." And I looked at him and said, "I've never heard of such a thing. What are you on about, Kev?" And Kev said, "Well, go and Google it." And I went back to my desk and Googled it, and needless to say, that was the start of the journey. I Googled it and watched as many videos as I could back in those days. I mean, it's only 10 years ago, and actually 13 years ago, when I first started trying to get it going, and there wasn't a great deal of access to stories about it other than books and some videos or DVDs you could buy. God, I sound old. And it was enough to titillate me, that's for sure. And I was curious as to what I could do to make it happen.
So in a nutshell, do you want to explain what the race is, like distance wise, and what it entails?
Sure. So it's West Coast United States to East Coast, which is 3,200 miles, is it? 3,008? I can't remember now. Yeah, basically, give or take, it's 3,500 miles. And you can do it as a solo, which is absolutely ridiculous. Um, you can do it as a pair, or a four, or even an eight. And you can do it as a mixed pair, a mixed four, etc., etc. And the objective is to get from one side of the states to the other without stopping. And so you have to have one cyclist on the road at any one time from your team. So you have a convoy of vehicles, you have a crew, and you have your cycling team. And it's a huge operation. It's a road show, and it's non-stop, and therefore it is just the most grueling event on a bicycle on the planet. There's just no question about it. But certainly back in 2011, there wasn't any question. I think off the back of Race Across America, lots of people have realised that the bar can be raised and are coming up with all sorts of challenges now. So anyway, yeah, I had this idea. I did some research. I realised that it was going to be quite difficult to get to the start line. It was probably harder to get to the start line than it was doing the race. 3 years it took me to build the team, to find the finances, to train, to plan, and we got there in the end. But that was almost like project managing a a groundbreaking project when you're not even a project manager, and you know it was doing things which were way beyond your network and your capabilities would allow. I had to try and find about £30,000 to do it. I had to find sponsors. I had to find people willing to give up their holiday time to come and sit in the car and travel across America at 20 miles an hour, all for the benefit of the 4 riders that were doing it. I had to find 3 other riders that were, also willing to embrace such an event. I had to basically recruit a team who could help me with the project management and, embrace the dream, which was my dream, but thankfully the people that came on board also embraced it as theirs. So it was definitely a team effort to get to the start line, and even more of a team effort to get to the finish line.
So you've got this little team. So you obviously decided on 4 was what you were going to go for. How do you go about sort of finding these 3 people, other other crazy like-minded people?
Well, one of my oldest friends, TK, he expressed an interest. I was living with him at the time actually, and he was all over it, and so he was in, and so it was just the 2 of us to start with. And then he's got a quite big family, so his 2 sisters, his brother, and his mum were immediately part of the crew. We had 13 crew in the end, and 4 riders, so it was a big event. Then through Tim's network, TK, he introduced Woodsy, who was in and has become one of my closest friends ever since. And then we decided to do a 4 just because of the we felt that would enable us to do it in the best time possible, and we wanted to win our category. And if it was 4 men, we wouldn't have been able to compete at the level of cyclist that we were at the time. So we thought we'll go for a slightly more niche category, which is the mixed 4. And I knew a friend from school, Anna, who was a very strong cyclist, and so she became the 4th person and the only female on the team. And my wife was an integral part of the crew, her brother as well, and some good friends. They massage therapist. We had a videographer, etc. And we all found a sponsor as well, which is the biggest thing. We split the fundraising between 2 charities. One's a children's charity in Winchester in Hampshire, where we all grew up, and the other is it was an arts charity, which was connected to the person who sponsored us with all the money. A chap called Peter DeHaan, who's a lovely chap, and I'm eternally grateful for him for facilitating the dream, basically. So Peter and his brother started, and I think they probably sold actually a business called Saga Holidays, and a wealthy individuals. And he said, "Look, I'll give you the money to do it. My son Leo will do the filming," and they've made a documentary on it, and that's been on Amazon Prime for the last 5 or 6 years. I think it might be taken off now, or I don't know actually if it has or not. But and part of the deal was that he would give us the money, and we would fundraise a target of £50,000, and half of it would go to his charity, and half of it would go to the children's charity, and we managed to accomplish all of those objectives. So everyone was happy, really. It was, lots of, this was pre kind of Skype meetings or online meetings. So we'd all convene in a central place in Winchester. I'd come from London, and Woodsy from Bath, and a few other people from other corners of southern England who were part of the team, and we would get together and we would plan every other weekend or once a month for the best part of 2 years. And the training for the cycling was just a case of trying to go as long as possible, and just getting used to being in the saddle for hours upon end. We would train with our heaters on in our sheds to try and get used to the humidity that we would be experiencing in Nevada and parts of Kansas and Colorado. So it was just a case of learning how to be uncomfortable on the bike. And then, it came around 2011 and we got to the start line. My bike didn't turn up because it was got lost by BA and turned up a day before the race instead of with us 3 days before the race. So that was a bit of early drama. The start line, we were confident, we were buoyant, we were ready to give it a good crack. And on day one, leaving a place called Oceanside in California, it's a big event. I mean, there's TV crews there. There's thousands of people on the promenade who see you off at the start. There's the whole kind of convoy of RVs from all the teams, all the support vehicles. It's a huge buzz. It's like a procession, really. And because of the traffic that the RVs and all the follow support vehicles create, the first, I think, 50 or 60 miles was what's called a no follow zone. In the for the whole of the race, you have to be followed by your crew, so as a safety precaution. But for this first 50 miles, we had to do it solo, and we went out into the hills outside of Oceanside and made our way east. And the one instruction from my mechanic was don't crash or don't get a puncture, because we had what's called tubs, or they're still short for tubulars, which is a type of racing tyre which glues onto the wheel. It's not an inner tube and a tyre, it's one single component. Very, very tricky to repair when you have a puncture. All I had to do was get through this first 50 miles where you then reconvene with your support vehicle who have made it out of town for a different way, and you're away on the Race Across America, 3,000 miles together. But for this first 50 or so, I was buzzing. I'd set off really quick, was going down some switchback kind of mountain roads, and, knee on nearly touching the tarmac, thinking I was, some sort of Formula motocross racer or something, and just mismanaged a switchback on the road and ended up just having to emergency brake because I knew I wasn't going to make it round the corner, and I locked up the wheel and ended up going into a bit of scrubland, a bit of bush, and I thought I got away with it, but then I cycled further down the road and my tyre blew out. Which meant that I had a puncture and I had to try and take that whole tub off the back of the bike, which has been freshly glued on by George, our mechanic. All the teams were passing me. I was on the radio to the rest of the team saying I've punctured, I'm stuck. This fresh rubber around the rim of the wheel was so tight that my fingers and thumbs and wrists were just nearly at breaking point to try and get this thing off. And it took about 45, 50 minutes, maybe an hour of just effing and jeffing on the side of this road, and basically losing the race for us before we'd even started. And our 3 other competitors from other teams, one from Germany, one from England, and one from the States, were just gaining time on us by, what felt like, time warp speed, really. That every minute felt like 10. Anyway, I got a fresh tyre on and pumped it up and hobbled into the meet point where our whole convoy was waiting for me, and had no idea what happened. Really, they were just aghast that I had completely cocked up the race from the start. But needless to say, we got on our way and put it behind us. And it took about a day, I think, to catch up the other teams, as we kind of made our way through out of California into Nevada, into this epic landscape. Probably your listeners will know this place. It's called the Glass Elevator, and you may not know it as a glass elevator, but it's that very famous picture of Nevada where you have these unbelievable rock formation that just spike up out of a very flat landscape. And you come down off the kind of ridge line, and it's a 12.5 mile descent. And you're doing an average speed of 50 miles an hour for 12 miles on a bike, and you just come into the flat desert, and it's absolutely astonishing. And then that was where we did our very first changeover. So just to paint a little picture of how the strategy works for Race Across America when you do it as a four, you want to try to optimize the amount of time that you're riding your bike before you get too tired, but you still want to go as fast as you can. So we decided, and with some advice from a guy called George, who was the race director, he said you should do it with two people on the road. Two people as a partnership, but only one person on the road at any one time. And that one person should be doing a 5 mile pull, which is a 5 mile ride, basically. And then further down the road, in 5 miles, is your partner. And you come in after 5 miles of really trying to push it quite hard, which is about 20, 25 minute, half an hour of really hard work. And you then overlap the wheel of your partner. They then do their 5 miles. You have your bike placed on the support vehicle car that's been waiting with your partner, and you then what's called leapfrog your partner as he's riding along or she's riding along, and wait 5 miles further down the road. And that happened across 3,000 miles, basically. So we'd be doing 5 mile stints. So it's basically like interval work, really. And I would have, the same amount of time resting as I would be working, because that's when my partner was on the road. And after about 100 miles, maybe 150 miles, depending on what the terrain was like, we would then have a full swap out. So the other two people in our team would then do the same thing, and me and Woodsy, my partner, would then jump in the RV and drive with the team 100 miles down the road, ready for the next main switchover. So it's quite it's quite convoluted when I try and describe it, but you really need a little diagram to show how it works. But so that was the mechanism in which our team leapfrogged across the states, really, but with always one rider on the road. And yeah, we crossed. I don't even know how many states it is, really, but probably 15 states. We had a crew who were absolutely phenomenal. We had probably 4 vehicles. People are driving, with matchsticks popping their eyelids open, and consuming Monster and Red Bull energy drinks like on an hourly basis. They're preparing food for us. They're giving us massages. They're doing navigation. They're looking out for us through the dead of night. There are lights through the dead of night. I mean, we have lights on our bikes, but they're irrelevant, really, because they're not powerful enough back in 2011. So you had to operate in the headlights of the follow vehicle. There are safety net in case we fall asleep on the bike, or in case we lose concentration and we just drift off into the road or off a side of the road. They are mechanical support for any punctures or any issues with the bikes. There are nutrition, preparing food and then giving us food on the go as well. They were our pick-me-up. They would play the music for us that we needed. They would be our biggest fans and our biggest, supporters when we're out there going deep, having to try and move the bike forward. And you know, there were times where it became extremely tense, frayed spirits, and there everyone felt like quitting at some point. We had um, tears and tantrums from everyone, probably more so than me. None more so than me, shall I add? Um, uh, just because, I wanted to succeed, and I was always on the limit. And it was a race which defined all of our characters, I think, and we'll never ever uh, lose that memory and lose the value which it placed upon our friendship and also our ability to achieve things. We ended up um, getting to Annapolis in 6 days and 10 hours, um, and only incurred a couple of time penalties where we did some one or two mistakes on the route, which were contentious to say the least anyway, but we weren't going to battle them. And so we didn't win our category. We ended up as a three-person team because Anna couldn't quite make it to the end. So it was myself, Woodsy, and TK who had to rotate in shifts without any long-term sleep. It was just a case of sleeping in the back of a van for 3 days, really, as and when. But yeah, we ultimately achieved the dream. And like I said, there is a documentary on our team doing it. But sadly, we didn't really have round the clock footage because that was really where the true experience was when people are on their wits' end. Their nerves are frayed. Their belief is hanging by a thread. Um, and everyone's collective will got us through that race. And fortunately, we came out of it with no serious injuries, no accidents, and as lifelong friends, really. And like I said at the very start of the story, the first challenge was getting to the start line, against all odds, really. And then the second challenge was to get to the finish line, and we did it. And it's pretty surreal to even think back on it now. Really, I haven't really talked about it for a long time, but yeah, it was a life-changing experience. And if anyone ever has the opportunity to do it, don't even think about it. Just go and do it.
So you had this little blip at the beginning, the struggles with the tire. Is there any other sort of memories or experiences in the trip that you could describe for us? Maybe stuff when the cameras weren't rolling.
Yeah, I mean, there's time for me going for the Rockies, which is very special. I've got a picture on my wall actually I'm looking at right now. All the crew were standing on top of the RV, cheering me up, the Rockies, because I was the climber in the team. So any big mountains, the Appalachians or the Rockies, it would be me primarily on the road. And having all those people that you love and hold so dear cheering you on was just, it felt for a few hundred yards like I was winning the Tour de France. It was absolutely very, very special, and I hold that close to my heart. And then more less kind of less fanfare, but I remember going through I don't know where I was actually. We don't know whether it was in Missouri or Kansas, but I was riding my bike through the dead of night, and it was very quiet. It was just me and the support crew behind me, and an owl came over my head and flew with me right next to me. Full wingspan, just blew my mind, and it was right next to me for, I would say, 15 to 20 seconds. And the crew saw it in the headlights. It was right next to me. It was, that will never happen to me in my life ever again. and it was absolutely magical. Um, just, I was just powering along with the wind behind me, probably a really easy cadence. It was a warm evening, warm night, and then out of nowhere, this white owl just came down and just flew right next to me, and it was, absolutely unbelievable moment.
That's amazing. I don't think that's something you're going to forget. That's almost like symbolic, isn't it? There's something a very
Totally,
powerful image there.
Well, when it flew away, the crew came up and were like, "Oh my god, did you know it was there?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, it was absolutely, 1 in a million chance of that happening. Um, so there's lots of memories, but it was the only major drama really, I suppose, was the initial day where I thought I might have cocked it up for everyone, and it was, it turned out that we it wasn't that big a deal. So if you
Well,
do
it's,
watch the documentary, there's a lot of drama attached to that one moment, and I think that's just TV. It's just the editing. It wasn't really that big a deal.
well, I think it's interesting. People, you build up the race in your mind, and if you've done it, years of planning, it might have actually been better for your mind. I don't know. I sort of a bit of a
Mm.
release, like, oh, and once you feel like, oh, we might not win this, there's a different mentality. You're like, oh, we're trying to catch up. Maybe it's maybe that would have played out differently.
I'd look at it and think sometimes it's like a football manager has all these grand plans and tactics, and they go 1-0 down within the first minute of the game, and so you rip up the the plan and you start again, and it always seems to be okay, doesn't it? So I think you're right in that it was probably quite nice to be to be flying by the seat of my pants a little bit rather than just trying to stick to this plan so much. But what I would say, one of the another resounding memory was sleep deprivation. Um, that was the first time I've done an event where um, I understood why sleep deprivation is a form of torture. And I think all the crew did that, and it was on the crew chief Simon, who was a great crew chief, amazing project manager from months and years before we even got out there to when we were on the ground doing it. He would know when someone was on the edge, and for the safety of them and everyone around them, and for the good of the team, he would make the decision and pull them. He'd be like, you're coming in, you're coming off the road, or you're not driving anymore, or whatever it was, because you are when you're in that state, you're playing with people's lives, and and when you don't have any quality sleep for just days and days upon end, um, it starts doing crazy things. I mean, I definitely hallucinated at some point on the bike.
You sure? You sure it
Um,
wasn't the owl moment?
uh, yeah, no, I got witnesses for that one. No, there was one moment where I thought I saw something in front of me, and it wasn't. There was nothing there. Um, and there's a legend of race across America called Yuri Robic, and he died on his bike training in his homeland of Slovakia, I think, or Slovenia. Can't remember exactly, but he will be forever remembered as he did solo ram so many times over. And there's an amazing book, and he talks about how he would train so hard and for so long that uh, his delirious state would be an indication that he's gone deep enough, and that's when he would stop. And there was the stories of him doing Race Across America where he would be fighting bears in the middle of the road that weren't there. He would ride for 23 hours a day for 12 days. And so it's a race it's a race which completely redefines the word endurance, endurance sports, and endurance cycling. Because if someone said to you, you've got to ride your bike for 23 hours a day for 2 weeks, it just wouldn't compute with most people. But people do it for fun, you know. It's a crazy race, and um, it's a character and personality defining event you don't come away from that race the same person, even if you've just been crew. There's there's a perspective which you get, which never leaves you, really.
Well, I've had another brilliant story. Well, I've listened to two stories now. I've been captivated by both. I know you've got lots more sort of under your belt. We're going to have to bring it to a close, unfortunately. It's kind of coming to the end of the time we have. Do you want to give people your links again, just in case they want to find out you and maybe a little bit about the charities that you help with?
Yeah, sure. I need to update my website now if we're going to start getting a few clicks. Yeah, I'm OllieRastall.com is where I kind of is the home to some of my events. And then the charity of which I'm part of is Ordinary to Extraordinary, which is o2e.org, and that's a children's charity. So yeah, that's me, really.
Well, it's been great to hear another story, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Josh, and thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Oh, I love it. See you later. Bye bye.
Cheers.